Hi, I'm Sarah Redshaw, Managing Editor for babycentre.co.uk. It's Maternal Mental Health Month, and Baby Centre is here today to talk about mental health and depression in both pregnancy and postnatally. PND is very common. It affects around 1 in 10 women, and PND can also affect fathers and partners. Today, I'm joined by Annie Belasco, head of the charity PANDAS, which offers support around pre and postnatal depression, and herself has experienced perinatal mental health illness. And Marie, who's a midwife of 11 years, a mum, and well known on social as AKA the modern midwife. Thank you both for joining me today. Let's start with pregnancy, as I feel there's a lot of expectation that those 9 months of pregnancy should be a joyous celebration, you should be glowing and generally enjoying every moment up until your due date. But that's not the case for every woman. What can cause depression and anxiety in pregnancy?
Yeah, so you make a great point about the expectation. I think that actually is part of the problem at times. But to answer the question directly, there can be a wide range of reasons and different things that cause antenatal depression. So whether that be if you've had previous mental health illnesses or problems before, whether you're under additional financial pressure, as we know, there's a cost of living crisis. A lot of people are really feeling the pinch and under more pressure than ever before. And also your relationship, it really does change during pregnancy. And, things change a lot for a woman who's carrying a baby, but perhaps their partner isn't experiencing the physical changes as much. So sometimes there can seem like there's a bit of a gap actually in, your understanding of the pregnancy. And lots of women say to me in clinic, I'm feeling quite disconnected from my partner. They're still able to do all of the things that they were doing before, and I'm feeling like, I can't, and my life has really changed significantly. And that can be quite hard and sometimes make mums to be feel a little bit lonely. And then on top of that, if you have had a baby before, obviously we went through a really difficult time with COVID and all of the restrictions that occurred. And it's really sad to say a lot of women are really traumatized as a result of what they went through during that time, the separation that they perhaps had from their partner, the anxiety that was caused with the unknown of the virus and how that could potentially impact their baby. And I was pregnant actually with Georgie when we were in and out of lockdown. The maternity services were restricted. Unfortunately, I was a midwife, but even as a midwife, I did still find it difficult. It was a really hard time for everybody. But I think if you're pregnant and being separated from your partner, from appointments and things like that, a lot of women are traumatized by that. And even outside of COVID, if you've had a difficult pregnancy, prior to that, or any kind of complications or pregnancy losses, that can also impact how you feel during this pregnancy and in the postnatal period. So I know I've just run through a lot there, and I think even that has just scratched the surface. Everyone lives completely different lives. We're all exposed to very different things, and we all deal and manage with stress in various different ways.
Yeah, I guess everybody's pregnancy journey is different, isn't it? Like you say, you don't know the history or the personal circumstances, and you mentioned financial there, and we did ask the community if they had any questions. And of course, this time, lots of people are facing increase on costs. And one of our community members posted that money worries are causing her anxiety, and she goes on to say, "I'm 8 weeks pregnant into a planned pregnancy and didn't expect to feel this upset. I'm self-employed and may have to give up work early due to risk factors. I'm worried about how we will manage living on one salary. My partner already has debts, but is getting annoyed with me for not being more positive, but I just can't help feel like that we are doomed." I mean, that could possibly be quite a common situation, couldn't it? What advice would you give her, Marie, if she was in your care?
Yeah, it is actually sadly more common than you would think. Lots of women plan pregnancies, and then when actually they fall pregnant and they're looking at how they're going to manage their financial situation, that becomes a huge stress that they hadn't, because they're so focused on having a baby and getting pregnant, that then when it happens, they're like, okay, right, now I really need to plan for this. And that can be quite difficult. So the first thing that I would say that the lady has mentioned there is about giving up work early. So just some sort of general advice, really, to speak to her accountant about that specifically, what she's entitled to. The government do have various different offerings and pots of money that are available in various different circumstances. So she will have an accountant if she's self-employed. So speak to her accountant Um, and then the other thing that I would say as well is some financial planning, some budgeting. As a midwife, we actually do talk quite a lot about this kind of thing, about household incomings and outgoings. And also knowing that there is a lot of support available from your midwifery team. There's a dedicated team of perinatal mental health midwives. The services are really stretched. I am going to be honest, they are very stretched. However, the support is available, because she said she feels like she's doomed, and that feeling can be really overwhelming, and that can be stressful if you're having to manage that every day. So I think looking at how to manage that feeling of to use her terminology, doomed, is really important. And then the other thing is having very open conversations with her partner. She said her partner's getting annoyed with her for not being positive. I think that actually it's really important to have a conversation here as a couple, so that her partner can better support her and reassure her, as opposed to get frustrated with her about how she feels, because her partner really needs to understand this is a real stress for her, and it isn't something that can be kind of brushed off, or oh, it's all going to be fine. Actually, she needs more than that, and that's okay. So as I say, talking to the accountant, looking at what's available, doing some potential budgeting, knowing that there are support services available there if that feeling of feeling doomed is overwhelming and she wants to reach out and speak to someone professionally. And then of course PANDAS charity as well, they've got lots of support available there.
Thank you. Annie, it was just mentioned by Marie that worries about labour and birth can be a reason for anxiety. And I guess particularly if you've had a problematic pregnancy previously, or a traumatic birth with another child. We had several questions around this from the community, and I just wanted to read this one out. It says, I'm pregnant with my second and dreading giving birth again. It was pretty traumatic, and I feel I got anxiety after the trauma and damage it caused to my body, and I'm worried it's going to happen again. What can I do to stop myself feeling like this?
So, in terms of this woman's concern, it is completely understandable. And we receive a very high and consistent level of calls, emails, and texts around this subject of parents, women, and men coming back to us saying, I had a traumatic birth. It was really stressful. This happened, and I'm so worried about the potential stress is going to reoccur. Everyone's experience and story is very different, and anxiety based on previous experience is common and is concerning. And if you have had a bad experience, it's so important to be able to talk to a person and open up to a person who you trust, to work out what is worrying you, what potentially is triggering you, and what steps can we put in place to ensure that those signs or symptoms of a previous illness are picked up on early on. It's also worth mentioning that a debriefing service is available in maternity services, so you can and should have the opportunity to discuss your previous experiences, but also to understand what plan is so subjective, because nothing ever, life is what happens while we make plans. Birthing plans can be our preferred choices, but we know that for different reasons, plans can change. So it's really important to understand what preferences women want when planning the birth of their baby, and understand also what coping mechanisms can be put in place ahead of time to ensure that you feel supported and are in control.
Okay. And if someone is watching or listening to this and they've had a difficult labour or a premature birth, or a baby that spent time on NICU for health issues, I'm guessing these can all lead to anxiety and depression, and a sort of a feeling of being numb, or almost like an out of body experience. Presumably these are normal, but when should somebody seek help? When does normal change to a cause for concern?
Again, it's a really kind of grey area, and I think it's everyone's kind of interpretation of what normal is. So for one mother, normal might be feeling anxious all the time, which is really, really sad, and that means that person hasn't had the support. For another mother, anxiety and depression can be completely alarming and feel like it's come out of the blue, and there may be more urgency around that. I personally feel that every parent who is reflecting on past experiences, regardless of how traumatic they are, should always have time and validation of those feelings, irrespective of the spectrum of how severe or low in moderation they are. Birth trauma, depression, premature deliveries can be incredibly life transforming. And in terms of the trauma that you've been through, it's so crucial that when thinking about it, do discuss it with your trusted person, with your support network within the health professionals and at home, if you have that support network, and take any support that is available to you. So you have time and space to process the ordeal and experience what you have been through.
Okay. And Marie, as a midwife, can you instantly tell the difference between when a woman has what's known as the baby blues, which we hear discussed a lot, and I think most people are probably aware of, and postnatal depression? What are the signs that women and their partners can be looking out for, that they perhaps need some extra help, and that it might not be the baby blues, but something a bit more severe?
Yeah, this is a great question because everyone's heard of the baby blues, but postnatal depression they may well have heard of, but find it a bit more difficult to seek support for and properly identify. So the main way that in which we are able to differentiate or kind of say this is rule out baby blues really is length of time. So we know that there are more brain changes that occur during motherhood than any other time in life, including adolescence. So I'd just like to say, to start with, I suspect the baby blues are for a wide range of reasons, but one of them being there are massive hormonal and neurological changes that happen. So it's very normal for you to feel the effects of that emotionally. And the time frame that we expect really women to experience those symptoms is up to about 2 weeks. So normally it does actually, the baby blues begins, especially if you are breastfeeding, around the time that your milk, quote unquote, comes in.
Yeah.
So that's usually day 3 to 5. And those symptoms can persist for a little while, but they shouldn't persist for longer than 2 weeks. If they have continued on for longer than 2 weeks, it is more likely that we are perhaps looking at something like postnatal depression. However, it's really important, I think, to discuss any concerns that you have. So say, for example, you've had the baby blues for 10 days and you're really, really struggling with them. That doesn't mean that it isn't postnatal depression.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a factor that helps us kind of, support mums and say, okay, well, how long is this been going on for? But you know yourself how you feel and what's normal for you, and if you're really struggling. So I would say to any mum listening to this, yes, do take note of that 14 days, and if it has persisted for longer than that, and when I say it, what I'm referring to specifically are the symptoms that are associated with baby blues and postnatal depression, which are very similar. So feeling down, feeling helpless, loss of interest in things that you were perhaps interested in, or you found pleasure in, feeling quite tearful and very emotional as well, loss of appetite or increase of appetite, sleep disturbances. Obviously with a newborn baby you're going to have sleep disturbances. It's one of the things that is listed, but one of the ways that I often explain this to women is if your baby is asleep and you are unable to sleep, but you're exhausted, that can be a sign that there is perhaps something going on there. So as I say, the main thing to know is that it's very, very common to experience this kind of roller coaster of emotion. It's very normal in the postnatal period for you to experience baby blues, feeling down, feeling emotional and tearful. If it does persist, or you're feeling particularly down, depressed, and yourself how you feel, then do seek help at any time on your journey.
Okay. And if somebody's asked is there anything that they can do to stabilize or improve their mood after birth if they're feeling low, what tips would you give somebody?
Yeah, so I always like to start with pre-planning, ideally. So this might not be helpful for anyone that has just recently given birth, but anyone that's pregnant, hopefully this will be helpful. Is I wrote about it in my book, actually. It's making a postnatal plan. There's lots of discussion around, the birth plan that I am an advocate for. And of course, Annie mentioned that earlier as well. And, making sure that you have your preferences, but understanding things might not go according to plan. So I second that, but also having a little look at a postnatal plan. So who's coming to see you, when and why. I always say to women, choose and use your visitors wisely. You shouldn't be having guests come and sit and you run around host and make tea for them whilst they hold the baby on the sofa. Actually, this is an opportunity for people to come and support you and help you. So I think it's really important that you make that clear ahead of time, and you choose those people that are going to support you, and they're there all for the right reasons. They're not there for themselves, they're actually there for you as a real support system. So I think that's really important, building in that support early on, and making your plans known even during pregnancy. And then simple things like handing things over. I mentioned earlier about the pressures that that we are all under, and how that can impact us and our mental health, and therefore our symptoms and experiences. So really simple things like, if there's a list of things that you normally have responsibility for within your household, which most of us do, making sure that you physically write those down and hand them over to someone else. Like, when I was pregnant, I literally wrote down exactly what I do. I mean, I do the utility bills, for example, and some other household admin. And so I made sure that all of that was handed over to my partner ahead of time, because I knew that I was not going to be able to manage that in the postnatal period. So it's not just looking at handing over work responsibilities if you are working and going on your maternity leave. It's looking at what you do in the home as well and handing that over. So then to go on to stabilizing your mood and supporting yourself postnatally, if you are in that phase at the moment, then it's really important to know that there are various different forms of support available for you, from, for example, CBT, or that's cognitive behavioral therapy, or talking therapy, to medication, for example. And lots in between, like there's lots of self-help that you can also do on your journey as well, and kind of understanding yourself really as a mother. If this is the first time you've experienced motherhood, there's a lot for you to work through, and that change of identity, and that in itself can take time, and that can require lots of self-care and kind of those self-help tools like meditation, for example, or gentle stretching exercise. All of the classic things, they actually do make a difference. But yes, in maternity, those are the two things that we really offer, are the cognitive behavioral therapy and also medication.
Yeah, I also find from my experience, just lowering your expectations about what you could do in a day, or you're very used to kind of grabbing your bag and going out and meeting friends, whatever. But sometimes just the thought of having to get a changing bag and your baby, and then your baby's nappy needs changing, and getting out for a walk or to the shop or even just in the garden can seem like a huge kind of achievement contest. So I think lowering your expectations as well can also just help with feeling like you've achieved something that day, rather than just being in the cycle of feeding, sleeping, feeding, sleeping kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you've touched on a really important point there, actually. I think we see a lot of these sort of picture perfect things on social media, and everyone else looking like they've really got their stuff together, but everyone does have their own battles and struggles. And I can tell you one thing, as a midwife of a long time and as a mother myself, and about to do it all again, I can tell you that absolutely everyone has some sort of struggle or difficulty in the postnatal period that does require them to lower their expectations of, like you say, what you can do in a day. And if you manage to get out in the garden, if you have a garden, or you even manage to get out of the front door, you're doing great, because a lot of mums do feel the need to actually just stay in for those first few weeks, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that as well.
Yeah, okay. And Annie, if you do have a existing mental health condition that you either manage with or without medication, are you more likely to get PND if you or feel low?
I think the key to this question, and it's such a good and important undiscussed question, that many parents that come to us actually aren't aware of, that they could have, should have, or maybe want to have that conversation with their health professional. So a pre-existing mental health difficulty must be explored from the earliest stage. So whether that's from planning of conception throughout pregnancy, to birth and beyond. And it's vital to share this health condition with your midwife and any health professional associated with your maternal journey. I always see this conversation as in comparison to our physical health. We always talk about, you know, your mental health is important to your physical health. If any parent is worried about sharing their pre-existing mental health condition, if they were going to go to a gym and they had slipped a disc or had previously broken a bone, they would have to share that information for insurance purposes, so that they have the right training plan. And this is exactly the same for the mind. It's completely possible to have a mental health condition prior to conception that does not worsen, but equally, this could trigger further mental health challenges after having a baby. Having support throughout the entire journey, from your booking an appointment with your midwife through to birth and beyond, and really noticing the journey and how you're feeling throughout is paramount to you having the best possible experience of the maternity period. Every mental health condition is completely in relation to maternity treatable and recoverable with the right care and support. So we as a charity would absolutely encourage that honesty and commitment to the mental health in complete alignment with the physical health throughout the journey.
Great, thank you. And if somebody's watching this, or somebody's partner's watching this, and they're worried that they might have PND or have spotted symptoms in themselves, what would you suggest that they do?
The first thing I'd suggest is they do not Google, because that can really heighten anxiety and trigger things that may or may not be there. You're always going to find the worst case scenario. So to come to PANDAS Foundation, we have 5 different support channels, which are via different means: helpline, text, email, group, face-to-face. And you can go to our website to look for those. You do not have to have a diagnosis to reach out for support to us, and that's really important. We're also not in a position where we're going to diagnose you or offer any medical advice. We're there to listen, which is the key, we feel, skill of communication, and then work with you to help build that confidence in having those conversations with your midwife, with your health visitor, with your GP, to really understand and create a plan for you going forward. And also talk to your family and friends and your partner if you want to. There's lots of pressure around, you must talk to someone, you must do this. It's actually not a must. It's about what makes that individual feel safe, supported, and armed with the right knowledge, because you could talk to the wrong person within your network who may give perhaps not correct advice. So we would advise coming through the charity and your health professionals, and also sharing with someone that you trust within your network.
Thank you. I guess it's just wherever you are in that journey. So whether you're pregnant, you've obviously got your midwife available, or your GP. If you're sort of, you know, you've just got a newborn, again, you can speak to your midwife, health visitor, or at any point there's the PANDAS charity that you can get in touch with. It's just really about identifying the route that's going to be best for you to get some help.
Absolutely. And we're free, we have no waiting list, and we're open every day of the year.
And those details are on the screen. So thank you ever so much for that. Thank you both for joining me and giving such great advice. So we've got Annie Belasco from the PANDAS charity, and Marie, who's known on social as the Modern Midwife. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.